Hey everyone, and welcome back to Talk Tickers. You know how we do things here. We take a look at these earnings calls, break them down, find those golden nuggets that could really move the needle in your portfolio.
That's right.
And today, we're diving deep into Intuitive Surgical's Q4 2024 performance. They're the kings of robotic surgery, with that DaVinci system that everyone knows, and let me tell you, they had a phenomenal year.
They did.
Their results are a real wild ride.
Intuitive Surgical did a lot more than just meet expectations. They absolutely crushed them. We saw some really significant growth in pretty much every area: procedures, revenue, and of course those robot placements.
All right, so before we get into the weeds,
Yeah.
give us the big picture. What were the headline numbers that made investors pay attention?
For the full year 2024, Intuitive Surgical brought in a massive $8.4 billion in revenue. That's a 17% jump compared to 2023. And it was driven by an equal 17% increase in procedures using their systems.
Okay, so revenue and procedures both up 17%. That's not just good. That's remarkable. Now let's talk about robot placements. I know they're key for future growth. More robots should mean more surgeries, right?
Exactly. They placed a whopping 1,432 DaVinci systems globally in 2024. To put that in perspective, that's up from 1,313 systems in 2023. And a big driver of that was the launch of their brand new DaVinci 5 system.
Okay, the DaVinci 5. This is where things get really interesting. This new system seems to be a star. Why are hospitals so eager to get their hands on it?
Well, the DaVinci 5 is really something. It's their 5th generation system, and it's loaded with features that are really changing the game in the OR. We're talking enhanced imaging, super advanced instruments, and get this, force feedback technology.
Hold on, force feedback, like you'd see in a video game. Surgeons can actually feel what they're doing with this robot.
Exactly. It might sound like science fiction, but it really is a game changer for surgeons. With the DaVinci 5, they can actually feel the tissue, giving them an incredible level of precision and control. And we're not just talking about one specific type of surgery. It can be used for over 40 different procedures. It's incredibly versatile, it's advanced, and there's just a ton of excitement around it.
So the DaVinci 5 is a huge growth driver. But let's not forget about their other robotic platforms, the Ion and the DaVinci SP. How did those perform in 2024? Did they get overshadowed?
Not at all. Both platforms saw really phenomenal growth this year. The Ion is their flexible robotic system used mainly for lung biopsies. It had a stellar year with procedures increasing by 78%.
78%. Wow, that's a growth spurt if I've ever heard of one.
Okay.
Now, what about the SP system?
The SP system did great too. It posted a really impressive 72% growth in procedures. So while the DaVinci 5 may be stealing the spotlight, it's clear that Intuitive Surgical is hitting it out of the park across its entire product line.
It really seems that way. Incredible revenue growth, strong robot placements, all systems performing well. But I'm curious, where's all this growth coming from?
Geographically, are certain regions driving things more than others?
Globally, they saw a 17% increase in procedures across the board.
Yeah.
But there were a few standout performers. The UK, Ireland, Japan, and Germany all showed really strong growth.
Interesting. Those are all pretty developed markets. You'd think they would already have high adoption rates for robotic surgery, but it seems like there's still a lot of room to grow.
Exactly. And it's not just about geography. There are also some really interesting trends in the types of procedures being performed robotically.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What kinds of trends are you seeing? Is it all cancer surgeries, or are they expanding into other areas?
Well, one of the biggest trends is the shift towards benign indications, which actually grew 2% faster than cancer indications in 2024.
So they're moving beyond oncology. What's driving that shift? It seems like robotic surgery is really gaining traction for a wider range of conditions. We're seeing really strong growth in general surgery, particularly for things like gallbladder removal, for gut surgery, and appendectomies. It really seems like Intuitive's market is expanding, with hospitals and surgeons realizing the benefits of robotics for a ton of different procedures.
That makes a lot of sense. Minimally invasive surgery is becoming the gold standard, and Intuitive is taking advantage of that. But it's one thing to have all these robots. The real question is, how much are they actually getting used? Let's talk utilization. That's really how we know how much the robots are earning their keep.
Absolutely. System utilization is all about how often hospitals are using those DaVinci, Ion, and SP systems. It's a key indicator of how integrated robotic surgery is becoming in different healthcare settings.
So how did utilization trend in 2024? Are the robots gathering dust? Or are they running at full capacity?
They're definitely not gathering dust. They saw healthy growth in utilization across all platforms. The SP system utilization was up 12% for the year, and the ion utilization grew by an impressive 13%.
Fantastic. It's clear that hospitals see the value and are putting them to work. What about their multi-port systems like the DaVinci Xi and X? Do they see the same growth?
The multi-port systems are a little different. Utilization grew by 3% for the year.
Yeah.
Still growth, but definitely slower than the SP and the ion.
So is that a sign the market for multi-port systems is maturing? Are they approaching a saturation point?
It's possible. Multi-port systems have been around longer, so adoption might be leveling off. But remember, Intuitive is always innovating. They're always introducing new features and capabilities, so there's still potential for further growth, even in that segment.
Okay, that makes sense. Overall, it sounds like Intuitive Surgical is really firing on all cylinders. Strong adoption and utilization of their robotic systems across all their platforms, and expansion into new markets and procedures. But let's talk about the bottom line. Were they able to turn this momentum into cold, hard cash?
They did. Their Q4 revenue was $2.41 billion, a huge 25% increase over the same period last year. And as we said earlier, for the full year, they pulled in a massive $8.4 billion in revenue.
Those are some serious numbers, but revenue is only one part of the story. What about profitability? Are they actually making money?
They are definitely making money, and a lot of it. Their pro forma net income jumped by 29% in 2024, meaning they're not just growing, but growing profitably.
Wow, a 29% growth in net income. That's fantastic to hear. What's driving that? Is it just increased sales? Or are there other factors?
It's a few things working together, but a key driver is definitely that increased shipment volume. They're benefiting from economies of scale as they ramp up production, which means lower costs per unit. Plus, they're doing a great job of managing inventory, and that healthier bottom line shows it.
So they're becoming more efficient as they grow, and that's flowing to the bottom line.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're not just growing, they're growing smarter. That's what I like to hear. But they're not just sitting around counting their money, right? What are they doing to make sure this keeps going?
Well, they're continuing to invest strategically in research and development, expanding their manufacturing, and building out those digital tools, all to make sure they have long-term growth and stay ahead of the curve.
It seems they're playing the long game. That's a good sign for investors. All right, well, let's shift gears and talk about 2025, the year ahead. What are the biggest priorities and challenges facing Intuitive Surgical as they look ahead?
Well, their main focus is the full global launch of the DaVinci 5. They're planning to roll the system out worldwide and introduce a bunch of software and hardware upgrades throughout the year. This new system is their flagship, and they're pulling out all the stops to make it a hit.
It's great to see them really pushing the boundaries. But you said it yourself, things are always changing. What about the challenges? What are some potential headwinds they might face?
Well, international expansion is a major focus for them, particularly in markets like China and Europe. But with any expansion, there are some things to navigate: increasing competition, regulations, and the need to adapt. They're going to have to be clever to repeat their success.
It sounds like they're walking a tightrope. What about competition? There are more and more players entering the surgical robotics market. Are they feeling the pressure?
They're definitely aware of the competition, especially in the multi-port segment, but they're not worried. They're confident in their technology and the data they've built up. Plus, their global reach gives them a real advantage.
So they're not just relying on their past success. What are they doing to stay ahead of the competition?
Well, they're continuing to innovate and add to their products, but they're also focusing on differentiating themselves through their expertise and how they support hospitals. They're not just selling robots, they're selling a whole system of training, service, and data analysis. That's what helps healthcare providers get the most out of robotic surgery.
That's a great strategy. They're not just about technology, they've created a whole ecosystem.
They have.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here. From their financials to their future plans. It's obvious that Intuitive Surgical is on the move. It'll be exciting to see what they do next. But you know what time it is? It's time for the part of the show where we let our imaginations run wild. It's time for This Is Not Financial Advice.
That's right. Remember, folks, this is all just hypothetical. We are not financial advisors. This is just for fun. So do your research before you make any investment decisions.
Disclaimer given. All right, so what's your outrageous but plausible trade idea for Intuitive Surgical? What wild scenario could really shake things up?
Okay, so what if Intuitive Surgical partners up with a big tech company, someone like Apple, and they develop AI-powered surgical assistance features for the DaVinci, real-time guidance during complex procedures, all powered by machine learning.
Whoa, AI-powered surgery. That sounds like something out of a movie,
Yeah.
but it might not be so far-fetched.
Exactly. AI is already being used in healthcare, and Intuitive Surgical is known for being on the leading edge of innovation.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And think about what that could do. This kind of partnership could be a game changer. It can make the DaVinci even more valuable and bring in a ton of new investors who are excited about healthcare and AI. You got me thinking now. This could be massive. AI helping surgeons make better decisions, fewer complications, improved outcomes. It's a bold idea, but I like it. But remember, everyone, this is all hypothetical. Don't run out and buy stock in Intuitive Surgical based on our crazy ideas.
This is just food for thought, a little thought experiment to get you thinking about what's next for this really innovative company.
Well said. So there you have it, our deep dives into Intuitive Surgical's impressive Q4. And a little peek into what might be next for them. But we've got more to talk about. In the next segment, we'll take a look at their financials, their R&D pipeline, and the competition they're facing. So stick around. You won't want to miss it.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone.
All right, let's really get into the numbers now. What really stood out to you in their financials? Were there any figures that surprised you?
One thing that caught my eye was their gross profit margin. They hit a pro forma gross profit margin of 69.5% in Q4. That's up from 68% in the same quarter last year.
That's a pretty impressive margin. Why the improvement? Is it just higher sales or is there more to it?
It's a few things. First, as they produce more, they're seeing the benefits of economies of scale. They're getting more efficient, which means lower costs per unit. They're also doing a better job of managing inventory, reducing waste. And that all helps the bottom line.
So they're tightening things up, and it's working.
That's right.
But it's not all internal. What about those external factors? Supply chain problems and logistics costs have been affecting a lot of companies.
Well, it seems like Intuitive Surgical is handling all that pretty well. They actually improved their freight and logistics costs in Q4, which suggests that those supply chain problems are starting to go away. That's a good thing for them.
Sounds like everything's going well. They're running an efficient operation and even getting some help from the outside. But no company has a perfect journey.
True.
What challenges did they mention? Any potential headwinds in 2025?
Well, they are performing great, but they did say they expect their gross profit margin to be a little lower in 2025, maybe around 67 to 68%.
So even Intuitive Surgical is seeing some margin pressure. Anything to worry about?
Not necessarily. It's more about understanding what's happening. One reason is they're making big investments in new manufacturing facilities. Those are really important for growth. But initially, they'll have higher depreciation expenses. And that will affect margins for a bit.
Short-term pain for long-term gain.
Exactly. They're also expecting a change in what they're selling. With newer products like the DaVinci 5, Ion, and SP making up more of their sales, those systems currently have lower margins than their older systems. So as sales of those newer platforms grow, it's normal to see some margin pressure.
Right, they're putting a lot of faith in those newer systems. And that might mean lower margins in the beginning. But what about those macroeconomic factors? Didn't they mention something about currency fluctuations?
Yeah, they did. They expect the strong US dollar to affect their margins too. It makes their products more expensive in other countries, which can hurt international sales and profitability. So they've got some challenges there.
Sounds like margin management is going to be important in 2025. It'll be interesting to see how they balance growth with profitability.
For sure.
All right. We've talked margins. What about operating expenses? Didn't they say those were going to increase?
Yes. They are expecting operating expense growth in the 10 to 15% range for 2025. Part of that is those depreciation expenses we talked about. Plus, they're increasing their investment in research and development, which shows they're still focused on innovation.
So even with margin pressure, they're not cutting back on R&D.
Nope.
Good to see. But that's not all. What about legal expenses?
Yeah, they mentioned those too. They're expecting them to be higher in 2025 because of ongoing lawsuits. It's part of doing business in their industry, but they are managing them well.
Okay, so they have margin pressures, increasing expenses, and lawsuits to deal with. But let's talk about what really matters to investors. Earnings per share. How do they do?
Really well. Their pro forma earnings per share went up 28% in 2024. That comes after a 22% increase in 2023. So they're consistently growing earnings.
That's great to hear. How are they doing it?
A few things are contributing. Strong revenue growth, good profit margins, and share buybacks. They're doing well on a lot of fronts. And that's adding value for shareholders.
It sounds like they've got a good plan. They're growing, profitable, and rewarding their investors.
Let's dig into some of their specific platforms. The Ion system, didn't they say something about Europe?
They did. They got the green light to market the Ion in Europe. That's a big opportunity for them. The European market is wide open, so
Oh,
it's a great chance for Intuitive Surgical to get in early.
it seems like they have a head start there. Do you think they'll be as successful in Europe as they have been in the US?
I think it's a real possibility, given how well the Ion has done here.
Okay. What about the DaVinci SP? Didn't they talk about using it more in thoracic and colorectal procedures?
They did. They're waiting on the FDA to approve a special stapler for the SP.
Mm.
Once they have that, they'll be able to offer the SP for more procedures here in the US, which could be a big source of revenue.
So the SP is ready to grow as soon as they get that approval.
It seems like they're always innovating and finding new ways to use their technology. But all that must be attracting some attention. What about the competition? How are they dealing with all the new players in surgical robotics?
The surgical robotics market is definitely more crowded these days. Intuitive Surgical is facing more competition than ever, but they're up for the challenge. They're confident in their experience and data, and their global reach gives them a big advantage.
So they're not panicking. Are they taking any proactive steps to keep their lead?
Absolutely. They're continuing to innovate and expand their products, but they're also focused on offering better training and support to hospitals and surgeons. It's not just about the technology, it's about the whole experience.
That's smart. Okay, we've talked about competition in the US. What about their global growth? They mentioned good things in the UK, Ireland, Japan, and Germany. Why are they so successful internationally? Is it the same model as the US?
They've been very strategic. They've invested a lot in building networks around the world, working with hospitals and surgeons everywhere. But they also understand they have to adapt to different needs in different markets. One size doesn't fit all in the global market.
So they're taking their expertise and tailoring it to each new area.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But growth takes money. How are they balancing their investments with returns for shareholders?
They're trying to be balanced. They want to invest in R&D and capital expenditures to keep growing. But they also know they need to give back to shareholders through dividends and buybacks. So they're trying to grow the pie and share it too.
It's a good mix of being growth-oriented and shareholder-friendly. They're not just sitting on their cash, but investing in the future and rewarding their investors.
Exactly.
Okay, but robots and factories aren't everything. They also mentioned investing in digital tools. What are they doing on the digital side of things?
Well, they're embracing digital healthcare. They're developing software that works with their robotic systems. Surgeons can use it to plan and simulate surgeries, analyze data to get better, and even get training and support online.
So they're more than just a robotics company. They're a technology company, using data to make everything more connected.
Right. They see data as something really valuable. They're gathering data from their robots and using it to learn, to improve their products, develop new techniques, and personalize care. They're on the leading edge of data-driven healthcare, using it to improve patient outcomes.
It's incredible how they're transforming surgery. But with all this data, there's a lot of responsibility. What about security and privacy?
They take those very seriously. They're putting in place tough security and following strict privacy rules because they know that trust is so important in healthcare, and they're working hard to protect it.
I'm glad to hear they're not taking any shortcuts. Okay, so we've talked about the present, but what about the future? Where do they see surgical robotics going in the next 5 to 10 years?
They believe surgical robotics is still really young, with a lot of potential. They see a future with even more advanced robots that can do more complex procedures, with tiny incisions and amazing precision.
So they're not just focused on today, they're looking ahead. But they're not just relying on their own R&D. They mentioned acquisitions. What's their plan there?
They're being smart about acquisitions. They're looking for companies with technology that fits with their business, companies that can help them expand their products or enter new markets. They want to create value and get stronger.
That sounds like a good plan. But growth in healthcare can be tricky. What about reimbursement? That's always changing and can be a big hurdle.
They know how important reimbursement is. They're working directly with hospitals and insurance companies and government agencies to show that robotic surgery is worth it. They're using data to prove that it leads to better results, shorter hospital stays, and lower costs overall.
So they're not just waiting around. They're actively making their case.
Exactly. They're also working to make their robots more affordable. They're coming up with new ways to pay for them and finding ways to lower the cost, because they know that cost matters a lot.
It's good to see them approaching this from different angles. They're highlighting the benefits and making it more accessible. They understand that both outcomes and costs matter.
Exactly. All right, well, we've talked a lot about their business. But what about the people? What's the culture like at Intuitive Surgical?
It's a really great culture, focused on innovation, collaboration, and customer service. They're known for being mission-driven. Their employees are passionate about using technology to improve healthcare. They're not just building robots, they're trying to change healthcare for the better.
Sounds like they've built an environment that attracts and motivates talented people. Okay, well, we've covered a lot. Financials, technology, strategy, culture. What's your overall takeaway from all this? My biggest takeaway is that they're doing incredibly well. They have great financials, they're investing in new things, expanding globally, and they're managing risk well. Plus, their culture is really strong. They're attracting top talent.
So are you optimistic about their future?
I am. I think they'll continue to be a leader in this space. They have a good track record, a clear vision, and they can make things happen.
Very well said. It's clear they're shaping the future of surgery, but we have to remind everyone we're not financial advisors. So this isn't financial advice.
Right. Do your own research before you make any decisions. And talk to a financial advisor. Make sure any investment is right for you.
Exactly. Okay, well, let's have some fun. Before we finish up this part, it's time for This Is Not Financial Advice.
That's right. Where we let our imaginations run wild and speculate. What could shake things up for the companies we cover?
So what's your wild idea for Intuitive Surgical? What out-of-the-box scenario could send their stock flying? Or maybe crashing?
All right, how about this? What if they partnered with a big telehealth company like Teladoc or Amwell, and they created a remote surgery platform? Surgeons could control the robots from far away, operating on patients miles away, maybe even in places that don't have easy access to surgeons.
Whoa, remote surgery. Sounds like Star Trek. Are we beaming surgeons across the galaxy?
Not quite, but the technology is being developed, and Intuitive Surgical is the perfect partner. They have the experience and the robots to make this happen.
Okay. I'm starting to see the potential here. Think about healthcare access. People in rural areas could have the same care as those in big cities.
Exactly. And for Intuitive Surgical, it could be a massive new market. They already have the robots and the expertise. They could create a whole new way to deliver healthcare.
I'm on board. This is a wild idea, but I like it. It could really transform things.
It could.
But of course, it's all speculation. There are a lot of obstacles.
For sure. Technology, regulations, ethics, lots to work out. But sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that change everything.
True. So there you have it. Our wild idea for Intuitive Surgical. A world where distance doesn't matter for surgery. But remember, this is just a thought experiment. Don't buy or sell stock based on this.
Exactly. This is just to get you thinking about the future.
Okay, well, we've had some fun. Now let's get back to reality. In the next part, we'll look at their R&D pipeline, the competition, and the regulations they have to navigate. There's still a lot to learn, so stick with us.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Intuitive Surgical's Q4 2024 performance. We've covered a lot of ground, from their financials to their global plans.
We have.
And even some wild ideas for the future. But we've saved some of the most interesting stuff for last. To really understand where a company's headed, you got to look at their R&D, their competition, and what they have to deal with in terms of regulation.
That's how you get the full picture.
Okay, so let's start with that R&D pipeline. What are they cooking up in those labs? What new things are coming that could really drive growth in the future? Well, Intuitive Surgical is all about innovation. They're always pushing the boundaries. They're not happy just sitting still.
You're always trying to make things better and develop entirely new platforms. That could really change the game. That's what's kept them on top for so long. They're not just reacting. They're shaping the whole industry.
That's right.
So what's next? Are they just going to keep improving the DaVinci 5 and the SP system? Or are they trying something completely new?
They're doing both. They're adding even more to the DaVinci 5 and the SP. But they're also exploring new applications. Things like natural orifice surgery and single port surgery. Those require even more precision and less invasive techniques.
That's some exciting stuff.
It is.
But we got to be real. Healthcare innovation takes time, sometimes a really long time. And while they're working on those next generation systems, they've got more and more competitors trying to catch up. How's the competitive landscape looking these days?
The surgical robotics market is getting pretty crowded. You've got companies like Medtronic, Johnson & Johnson, and Stryker. They've all developed their own robotic surgery systems, and they want a piece of the action. And it's not just the big guys. There are also tons of startups popping up with new ideas and new ways of doing things.
So they're facing pressure from everywhere, like David and Goliath. with a giant taking on a swarm of smaller challengers.
It's a good analogy.
How are they handling all this? Are they just counting on their size and experience? Or are they changing things up?
Well, they're playing smart. They're using their strengths, the data they have, their global reach, their relationships, and their reputation for innovation. They've got a solid base, and they're using it to stay on top.
So they're not just sitting back. They're actively defending their turf and pushing into new areas.
They are.
But even with the best technology and plans, there's one thing that can trip up any healthcare company: regulations. The rules for medical devices are always changing.
You're telling me.
How are they dealing with all that?
It's a tough one. But they have a whole team of experts working on it, making sure they meet all the standards for safety. They know that patient safety is the most important thing.
Good to hear they're taking that seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've talked about a lot: their money, their strategy, the technology, competition, and the rules. But before we wrap things up, what's your big takeaway? If you could just leave our listeners with one thing, what would it be?
For me, it's that Intuitive Surgical is all about innovation in healthcare. They're true pioneers. They're always trying new things, using technology to make surgery better, less invasive, more precise, and more effective. They're not just building robots. They're changing the future of surgery.
Well said. It's been really interesting exploring their world. They're leading the way in this whole robotic surgery revolution. But as always, this is just the start of your research. Do your own digging, get different perspectives, and talk to a financial advisor. Make sure any investments you make are right for you.
Couldn't agree more.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful and maybe even a little inspiring.
Until next time.
And remember, always do your own research.